On Thanksgiving, my daughter texted, "Forget about our help in your old age. We have our own lives." I stayed calm, contacted my lawyer, and removed her from my $5 million inheritance. That same evening, she showed up. No one was prepared for what happened next. Before continuing, subscribe to the Cold Revenge channel, as the Sweet Revenge channel will soon cease to exist. Thank you for your attention. My name is Robert Morris. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Charleston, South Carolina. For 4 decades, I built my restaurant business from scratch. 3 successful seafood establishments that became local landmarks. Morris Catch started as a single storefront on King Street, and through sweat, sleepless nights, and genuine love for Southern coastal cuisine, it grew into something I was proud of. I believed my legacy would pass to my daughter Patricia. I was wrong about that, too. Patricia wasn't always the person she became. I remember her at 7 years old, standing on a stool in my first restaurant's kitchen, carefully watching me prepare she-crab soup. Her eyes lit up with curiosity, asking endless questions about every ingredient. She'd taste the broth and wrinkle her nose, suggesting we needed more of that yellow stuff. Saffron. Sometimes she was right. That girl disappeared somewhere along the way. The change accelerated 5 years ago when she married Thomas Johnston. Tom came from money, or at least he looked like he did. Expensive suits, confident handshake, investment consultant credentials. He swept Patricia off her feet with talk of portfolio diversification and wealth management. I should have paid more attention to the fact that his own investments kept failing. The first year of their marriage, Patricia asked to borrow $15,000 for furniture. I transferred it the same day. She promised to pay it back next month when Tom's commission comes through. That was the first lie, though I didn't recognize it as one at the time. The requests became more frequent. $23,000 for a car repair on a Lexus RX 350. I'd bought her as a wedding gift for $52,000. $30,000 to help Tom through a rough quarter. $18,000 for a European vacation to clear our heads and reconnect. Each time, the same promise. "We'll pay you back, Dad. We just need a few months." They never paid back a single dollar. I bought them a house on Seabrook Island Road, $780,000. Put the down payment in myself, $156,000, because Tom said his capital was tied up in long-term investments. Patricia cried with happiness when they got the keys, hugging me tight. "You're the best father anyone could ask for," she whispered. I wanted to believe her. The phone calls became less frequent. Sunday dinners, once sacred, dwindled to monthly obligations, then quarterly inconveniences. When they did visit, Patricia's eyes glazed over when I talked about the restaurants. Tom would check his phone constantly, making little effort to hide his boredom. Once, I overheard him in my bathroom talking to someone. "Yeah, I'm at the old man's place. No, just killing time until we can leave without being rude. He's loaded, though, sitting on millions in real estate and business equity." The old man. That's what I'd become to him. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I sat in my office above the King Street restaurant. My hands had been shaking for weeks. Nothing serious, the doctor said, just age and stress. But it made me think about the future, about what happens when you need help, about who shows up when the chips are down. I sent Patricia a text message at 1:15 in the afternoon. "Honey, can we talk soon about the future? I'm having some health concerns and want to discuss what support might look like as I get older. Love you." I watched the 3 dots appear and disappear several times. Finally, at 2:37, her response came through. "Dad, be realistic. I have my own family, my own life, my own career. Tom says we can't take responsibility for you. Forget about our help when you're older. Hire a caregiver. We have our own lives." I read it 3 times. Each word felt like a small cut, the kind that doesn't bleed much but goes deep. 40 years of building something from nothing, countless early mornings and late nights, paying for her private school education, $43,000, her college tuition at College of Charleston, $97,000, her wedding, $78,000 for a single day, where Tom's family looked down their noses at my quaint little seafood restaurants. And this was my return on investment. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out a folder I'd been maintaining, Call it a father's paranoia or a businessman's instinct. Bank transfer records, copies of checks, text messages where Patricia promised repayment, emails from Tom outlining his temporary cash flow issues. I started adding it up. The first figure that came up was shocking. Then I double-checked it, triple-checked it. $847,000. That's how much I'd given my daughter and her husband over 5 years. Not lent, given because none of it ever came back. The house down payment, the car, the wedding, the furniture and repairs and investments and emergency funds. Month after month, year after year, I'd open my wallet because she was my daughter. And isn't that what fathers do? I sat there as the afternoon light faded, watching the harbor through my window. Below me, the dinner rush was starting. My head chef Stephen was running the kitchen. He'd been with me for 14 years, loyal and hardworking. The servers knew every regular customer by name. This was my real family, I realized. The people who showed up every day, who cared about what we built together. My daughter had shown me exactly where I ranked in her life. Somewhere below inconvenient and above useful ATM. The shaking in my hands stopped. Something cold and clear settled in my chest. Not quite anger, more like crystallized disappointment. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Gerald Richardson, an estate attorney I'd met at a Chamber of Commerce event 2 years ago. We'd talked briefly about succession planning for the restaurants. It was time to have a longer conversation. That evening I stayed late at the restaurant, long after the last customers left. The cleaning crew worked around me as I sat at my usual corner table, the one where I could see both the kitchen and the dining room. I'd sat in this same spot for decades, watching my dream take shape. I kept thinking about the little girl on the stool, tasting soup and suggesting improvements. Where had she gone? When exactly had my daughter transformed into someone who could write those words without a second thought? The answer came in flashes of memory, scenes I'd pushed aside but never quite forgotten. 2 years ago, I'd invited Patricia and Tom for Sunday dinner. I'd spent the afternoon preparing her favorite childhood meal, low country boil with shrimp. I'd caught myself that morning. She arrived an hour late, barely apologized, spent the entire meal on her phone. When I asked what was so urgent, she sighed like I'd asked her to explain quantum physics to a child. Just work stuff, Dad. You wouldn't understand. I'd run 3 successful businesses, but apparently her part-time position at a boutique in Mount Pleasant involved complexities beyond my comprehension. Tom had been more direct. Over dessert, he'd explained, in that patronizing tone people use when they think they're educating you, why my traditional business model was outdated. Real wealth comes from smart investments, not from, manual labor and customer service. He said customer service the way someone might say sewage treatment. I'd smiled and nodded, playing the humble old man. Inside, I was calculating his investment track record based on what Patricia had accidentally mentioned over the previous year. From what I could piece together, Tom had lost more money than he'd made on every venture he touched. Another memory, Patricia's 35th birthday 3 years ago. I'd closed the restaurant for a private party, invited all her friends, hired a band. She'd seemed happy that night, genuinely warm. When the guests left and it was just us cleaning up, she'd hugged me. "Thanks, Dad. You always come through for us." "For us?" she'd said. "Not for me." That's when I should have noticed. She and Tom had already become a single unit, and that unit viewed me as a resource to be managed and exploited. The next morning I called Gerald Richardson's office at 9:15. His secretary put me through immediately. "Mr. Morris, good to hear from you. What can I do for you?" "I need to change my will, Gerald." "How quickly can we do that?" He suggested 10 o'clock at his office on Meeting Street, 8th floor. I arrived with my folder of documents and a printout of Patricia's message. Something about seeing those words on paper made them more real, more permanent. Gerald read the message slowly, his expression neutral. Then he reviewed my financial records. 45 minutes later, he looked up. "Mr. Morris, I can redraft your will in 3 days. But I have to warn you, this will cause a family storm." I felt that cold clarity again. She already caused the storm when she wrote that message. We talked through the details. My current will left Patricia 60% of the restaurant business and my house on Battery Street. The property alone was worth $2,800,000. Combined with her share of the business, she stood to inherit about $5,200,000. The remaining 40% of the business was designated for a culinary education fund I'd planned to establish. I want to change everything, I told Gerald. 100% of the business and the house goes to the foundation. Patricia gets $50,000, enough that she can't claim she was completely disinherited and challenge the will, but not a penny more. Gerald nodded slowly, a hint of approval in his eyes. Smart. That makes it much harder for her to contest. Nominal bequest shows intent, not oversight. The next day I met with Laura Hamilton, a financial consultant who specialized in charitable foundations. She walked me through the structure of what would become the Morris Culinary Foundation. Scholarships for young people from South Carolina who wanted careers in the culinary arts. People who had the passion Patricia had lost, if she'd ever really had it. The day after that was Thanksgiving. At 7:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. We're celebrating with Tom's family. Have a good day. No invitation, no phone call, not even a happy Thanksgiving, Dad. Just a brief notification that I wasn't part of their plans, delivered with the warmth of a parking ticket. I spent Thanksgiving at the King Street restaurant with my staff. We'd opened for a few hours to serve a community dinner, something we'd done for 15 years, offering free meals to anyone who came in. Stephen had outdone himself with the turkey and all the fixings, the dining room filled with people who actually wanted to be there, who appreciated the food and the company. As I watched families laugh together, strangers sharing tables and stories, I realized these people understood something Patricia had forgotten: the value of showing up, the importance of gratitude, the simple human decency of saying thank you instead of, "What's next?" One of the guests, an elderly woman named Ruth, who came every year, squeezed my hand as she left. God bless you, Mr. Morris. You have a good heart. I wish that were enough, but good hearts get broken when they're taken for granted long enough. The day after Thanksgiving, I returned to Gerald's office at 2 in the afternoon. He had the new will ready, printed on crisp legal paper. I read through every page carefully. It was all there: the foundation, the scholarships, the nominal bequest to Patricia. Are you certain about this? Gerald asked. Not as a lawyer trying to change my mind, but as one human checking in with another before an irreversible step. I thought about that message one more time. Forget about our help when you're older. Hire a caregiver. We have our own lives, I'm certain. At 2 o'clock, with 2 witnesses and a notary present, I signed the new will. My hand didn't shake at all. Patricia didn't know it yet, but that Thanksgiving text message had cost her $5 million, and I was just getting started. The new will sat in Gerald's safe, but changing a document wasn't enough. I'd spent 40 years building a business. I knew the difference between a plan and proper execution. If Patricia discovered what I'd done before I secured my position, she'd drag me through every court in South Carolina, claiming I'd lost my mind. So I needed proof that my mind was sharper than ever. The following Monday morning, I drove to Charleston Medical Center. The receptionist, a young woman named Ashley, looked surprised when I requested a comprehensive evaluation. Mr. Morris, is everything all right? You seem perfectly healthy. That's exactly what I need documented, I said. She scheduled me for the next day. Cognitive testing, neurological exam, the works. 3 different doctors poked and prodded, asked me to remember word lists, draw clocks, subtract numbers backward from 100. The neurologist, Dr. Harrison Chen, spent nearly an hour with me. Mr. Morris, he said finally, reviewing his notes, your cognitive function is exceptional for any age, let alone 67. Memory, reasoning, executive function, all well above average. Frankly, I wish half my 50-year-old patients scored this well. I'd like that in writing, I told him. Notarized, if possible. All 3 medical opinions. He studied me for a moment, understanding dawning in his eyes. Family disputes can get ugly, he said quietly. I'll have my office prepare comprehensive documentation. 3 days later, I had my insurance policy, 12 pages of medical records, signed and sealed, proving I was perfectly competent to make my own decisions. But documentation wasn't enough. I needed to understand exactly what Patricia and Tom had been doing with the money I'd given them. That's when I remembered seeing Margaret Collins' card at a Chamber of Commerce mixer 6 months back. Private investigator, formerly an auditor, the kind of person who could follow financial breadcrumbs. Her office was in a converted warehouse downtown, third floor, no-nonsense space with filing cabinets, and a desk that had seen better decades. Margaret herself was sharp-eyed, maybe 45, with the tired competence of someone who'd seen every kind of lie humans tell themselves. "Financial investigation," she said after I'd explained what I needed. "Tracking spending patterns, lifestyle analysis. That'll run $3,500 a month plus expenses. Could take 6 to 8 weeks for a thorough workup." "Money's not the issue. Accuracy is." She almost smiled. "Then we'll get along fine. I'll need access to what you already have. Bank records, transfer receipts, anything showing the money trail." I handed her the folder I'd brought. She flipped through it, her expression never changing, but something tightened around her eyes. "This is thorough. You've been keeping track for a while." "I run 3 restaurants. I know how to maintain records." "Mr. Morris, I have to ask. Are you sure you want to know what I find? Sometimes the truth is worse than the suspicion." I thought about that message. Forget about our help when you're older. Hire a caregiver. The casual dismissal of 40 years of sacrifice, I'm sure. 2 days before Christmas, Patricia showed up at the King Street restaurant during lunch rush. I was in my office reviewing vendor invoices when Stephen knocked. "Boss, your daughter's here." I found her in the dining room, all smiles and expensive clothes. She hugged me, and I caught the scent of her perfume, something French and probably $200 an ounce. "Daddy, I wanted to personally invite you to Christmas dinner. I know we haven't been around as much, but it's the holidays, right?" She was wearing a new Gucci handbag. I recognized the style from a shopping trip years ago when I'd bought her mother a birthday gift. $2,400 minimum. But what really caught my attention was the bracelet on her wrist. White gold, diamonds, distinctive twisted design. Cartier, if I wasn't mistaken. The kind of piece that starts around $8,000. "That's new," I said, nodding at it. Patricia's smile got wider. "Tom gave it to me for our anniversary. Isn't he thoughtful? He said I deserved something special." Tom, who'd asked me for $30,000 8 months ago because he was between deals and needed to cover temporary obligations. Tom, who, according to my records, owed various creditors $340,000. "Very thoughtful," I agreed. "Business must be going well for him." "Oh, you know Tom. Always has something in the works. He's brilliant with investments." Brilliant at losing money, I thought. But I kept my face neutral and promised to let her know about Christmas. After she left, I called Margaret Collins. "The bracelet," I said. "Can you trace where it was purchased?" "If they used a credit card, absolutely." The preliminary report arrived on my desk 10 days later. I read it twice, certain I'd misunderstood the numbers. $187,000. That's what Patricia and Tom had spent in the last 6 months. New furniture for their house, $43,000. 3 trips, Maui, New York, twice, Miami. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, restaurants where the wine cost more than my weekly grocery bill. Designer clothes, jewelry, a golf club membership Tom apparently never used, but looked good on his social media. Meanwhile, their official income was $70,000 combined. Tom's investment consulting brought in $42,000, down from previous years, no surprise there. Patricia's part-time boutique job paid $28,000. The math was simple and damning. They were living on my money, burning through it like tourists on vacation, while telling me they were struggling and needed just a little help to get through this rough patch. I sat in my office long after everyone else had gone home, looking at the report. The harbor lights reflected on the water outside my window, and somewhere in the city, Patricia and Tom were probably at another expensive restaurant, laughing about how easy it was to manipulate the old man. That's when the last pieces of my transformation clicked into place. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is hot and reactive. What I felt was cold and calculated. They'd treated me like an ATM for years, and I'd let them because I wanted to believe my daughter still loved me. But love doesn't send that text message. Love doesn't lie about being in financial trouble while dropping $8,000 on jewelry. Love doesn't say we have our own lives and expect money to keep flowing. I picked up my phone and texted Patricia, "Looking forward to Christmas dinner." Should I bring anything? Her response came immediately. Just yourself, Daddy. Can't wait to see you. I stared at that heart emoji for a long moment. Then I opened a new message to Gerald Richardson. We need to talk about additional protections. Can you meet tomorrow? Patricia and Tom thought they were playing me. They had no idea the game had changed, and I was just getting started with my next move. The day before Christmas, Margaret Collins delivered her full report. I'd asked her to dig deeper into Tom's finances, and what she'd uncovered made the first report look like an appetizer. Tom hadn't just been wasting my money. He'd been actively gambling with it. $230,000 I'd given them over the past 18 months. $164,000 of it gone. Not spent on living expenses or even luxury goods. Gone. Vanished into cryptocurrency speculation, penny stocks, and a Florida real estate development that existed mostly in someone's imagination. He's not an investment consultant, Margaret said, standing in my office. He has the credentials, but his track record is catastrophic. Every major investment he's advised on in the past 5 years has lost money. His clients either fired him or went broke following his advice. Then how is he still working? He's not, really. He has 2 clients left, both of them his wife's family friends who probably don't know better. Everyone else figured out he's poison. She slid another document across my desk. And this is interesting. 3 months ago, he tried to take out a home equity loan on the house you bought them. The bank rejected it because the title search showed you're listed as a co-owner for the down payment. He couldn't borrow against it without your signature. I hadn't known that detail when I'd structured the purchase, but my attorney had been smart enough to protect my investment. Tom had tried to leverage the house, my house, and failed. There's more, Margaret continued. His debts aren't just credit cards. He owes his former business partner $112,000 from a deal that went south. There's a judgment against him. If they can't pay, they'll start garnishing wages, going after assets, like the house, exactly like the house. I gathered all the documents, bank transfers, text messages where Patricia promised to pay you back next month, emails from Tom outlining his investment plans, the report showing where every dollar had actually gone. I organized it all into a folder, color-coded and cross-referenced. 40 years of running restaurants had taught me how to build a case with documentation. Christmas dinner was exactly what I expected. Patricia's house looked like a magazine spread. The new furniture Margaret had documented. Tasteful decorations. Everything perfect and expensive. Tom greeted me at the door with a firm handshake and that practiced smile. Robert, great to see you. Patricia's been cooking all day. My daughter emerged from the kitchen wearing an apron over designer clothes. The performance was almost touching in its transparency. Dinner conversation stayed light until dessert, when Tom leaned back in his chair and adopted what he probably thought was a casual tone. Robert, I wanted to run something by you. There's this incredible opportunity at Hilton Head. New resort development, ground floor investment. The returns are projected at 500% over 2 years. Patricia jumped in right on cue. Dad, Tom's done so much research on this. It's a chance for all of us to really secure our future. And when you get older and need care, we'd have the resources to help. I let the irony of that statement hang in the air for a moment. Patricia, who told me to hire a caregiver and forget about their help, now promising future care, contingent on me handing over $200,000 first. Send me the details, I said mildly. I'll have my financial advisor take a look. Tom's smile widened. He thought he had me. I left their house at 9, drove straight home, and called Laura Hamilton. She was the financial consultant I'd met with about the foundation structure, smart, ethical, and well-connected in Charleston's financial community. I need you to research something, I told her, then explained Tom's Hilton Head proposal. She called back 3 days later, right after New Year's. Mr. Morris, that development is a known pyramid scheme. The FBI's Charleston division opened an investigation 6 weeks ago. Several investors have already lost significant money, and the principals behind it are facing fraud charges. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not surprised. I'd expected Tom was trying to scam me. But the audacity of it, the calculation. He'd researched this scheme, knew it was fraudulent, and tried to drag me into it anyway. He'd known that elderly investors were the primary targets, that many of them would lose their life savings, and he'd looked me in the eye and called it an incredible opportunity. Laura, I said carefully, I need copies of everything you found. Documentation of the FBI investigation, news articles, whatever you can compile. Are you thinking of reporting this? I'm thinking of protecting myself, but yes, eventually. I met with Gerald Richardson the first week of January in his office overlooking Meeting Street. He read through everything I'd brought, the medical records, Margaret's investigation, the evidence of Tom's fraud attempt, with the same methodical attention he'd given to my will revision. This is comprehensive, he said finally. But Robert, you're thinking ahead to something, aren't you? You're worried they'll contest the will when they find out. Patricia's already suspicious. She knows I was angry about that message. It's only a matter of time before she checks with your office, asks questions. And when she does, she'll lawyer up immediately. They'll claim undue influence, diminished capacity, anything to invalidate the changes. He tapped the medical records. These help, but we can do better. Have you considered a living trust? Explain? Instead of waiting until you die for the will to take effect, we transfer ownership of your assets into a trust structure now. You're the trustee. You maintain complete control, all income, all decision-making authority. But legally, the assets belong to the trust, not to you personally. When you die, they pass according to the trust documents, not through probate. Which means there's no will for Patricia to contest. The assets are already transferred. She can sue the trust, but she'd have to prove you weren't competent when you created it, and you have medical documentation showing otherwise. Plus, we'd structure it as a charitable foundation with clear bylaws and purposes, much harder to challenge. I looked out his window at the Charleston skyline, at the city where I'd built everything. How long to set this up? 2 weeks for the paperwork, another week for the transfer process. Call it a month total. Do it. By mid-January, the Morris Culinary Foundation Trust existed as a legal entity. 85% of my restaurant business, the buildings, the equipment, the brand, everything now belonged to the foundation. I remained the managing trustee with full operational control and all income rights for life. But after my death, it would fund scholarships for young people from South Carolina who wanted to learn the culinary arts. The remaining 15% of the business and my house stayed in my personal name, subject to the will, leaving Patricia her $50,000. Just enough to prevent a complete disinheritance claim, not nearly enough to be worth fighting over. The paperwork was dense and technical, full of legal language about beneficial interests and revocable provisions, but the core of it was simple. I just made it nearly impossible for Patricia and Tom to get their hands on my life's work. I signed the final documents on a Tuesday afternoon. Gerald arranged for 2 witnesses and a notary, everything properly documented and sealed. When it was done, I sat in his conference room and felt something shift inside me. For 5 years I'd been on defense, giving Patricia money, trying to maintain a relationship, hoping things would improve. That ended with her Thanksgiving message. The will change had been my first step on offense. But this trust? This was checkmate. Set up 3 moves in advance. Patricia and Tom were still playing checkers, thinking they could manipulate the old man into one more big score. They had no idea I'd switched to chess. I drove to the harbor that evening and sat in my car looking at my boat, the Second Chance, 40 feet of well-maintained fishing vessel I'd bought 5 years ago. I'd named it that after my wife died, thinking it represented a second chapter in my life. Now I understood it differently. This was my second chance to decide what my legacy would be. Not money handed to ungrateful children who saw me as an ATM. Not a business sold off to pay someone else's debts. But something that would outlive me and actually matter. Young people learning a craft. Getting opportunities I'd had to create for myself. Patricia was going to find out eventually. And when she did, the real battle would begin. But I was ready now. More than ready. I was looking forward to it. A week after finalizing the trust documents, my phone rang at 9:43 in the morning. Patricia's number flashed on the screen. "Dad, we need to talk, urgently. I'll be there at 3 this afternoon." Her tone was different, tight, controlled, none of the practiced sweetness she usually deployed. Something had shifted. "I'll be here," I said calmly. I spent the intervening hours organizing documents. The folder with the trust paperwork went into my desk drawer. The comprehensive financial records stayed on top. Every bank transfer, every text message where she'd promised repayment, every receipt Margaret had documented. I arranged them chronologically, color-coded, cross-referenced, call it old habits from running restaurants, where inventory discrepancies had to be tracked to the penny. Patricia arrived exactly at 3, which told me how seriously she was taking this. She'd never been punctual in her life. She came alone, no Tom flanking her, no practiced smile. Just tension radiating from every line of her body. She sat across from me in my home office, the same chair where she'd sat as a teenager asking for college application advice. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. "I saw something yesterday," she said without preamble. "At Gerald Richardson's office. I was there about... It doesn't matter why." His secretary stepped away, and there was a file on her desk. Your name on it. Something about a will modification dated late November. She looked at me expectantly, waiting for denial or explanation. I gave her neither. "Is it true?" she pressed. "Did you change your will?" "Yes." One word, simple, unadorned, final. I watched the color drain from her face. "Dad, that message. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I was having a terrible day, and Tom had been pressuring me, and..." "A terrible day?" I stood, walked to my desk, retrieved the folder I'd prepared. "Let me show you what a terrible day looks like." I laid the first document in front of her. $847,000. That's what I've given you and Tom over the past 5 years. Here's the breakdown. She stared at the numbers like they were written in a foreign language. The house, $780,000. My down payment was $156,000. Your car, $52,000. Your wedding, $78,000. Then there's the loans, $15,000 in June 2 years ago, $23,000 last April, $30,000 in August. Every single one promised to be repaid next month when Tom's commission comes through. I pulled out more documents. Here are your text messages. "Dad, I promise I'll pay you back by Christmas." That was 2 Christmases ago. Still waiting on that one. Tom just needs to get through this rough patch. He's been in that rough patch for 5 years now, and somehow it's cost me almost $1 million. Patricia's hands were shaking. Real tears started. Not the manipulative kind I'd seen before, but something raw. "Dad, please. I'm your daughter. You can't just cut me off over one stupid message." "This isn't about one message." My voice stayed level, but something hard had crept into it. "This is about years of treating me like an ATM. About skipping Thanksgiving without even an invitation. About you and Tom trying to drag me into that Hilton Head investment scheme last month. You know, the one that's actually a pyramid scheme under FBI investigation." Her eyes widened. She hadn't known I'd looked into that. "But that message," I continued, "was clarifying. Forget about our help when you're older. Hire a caregiver. We have our own lives." That told me everything I needed to know about where I rank in your priorities. She switched tactics, tears giving way to anger. "You're being manipulated. Someone's gotten into your head, turned you against your own daughter. Try again." I pulled out another folder. "These are medical evaluations from 3 different doctors, all dated early December. Comprehensive cognitive testing. Neurological examination. Every single one confirms I'm in excellent mental health with no signs of diminished capacity." I spread the pages across the desk like dealing cards. "Here are 2 years of financial records showing careful planning and management. Here are the text messages where you promised to repay me. Here's Margaret Collins's investigation documenting how you and Tom spent $187,000 in 6 months on luxury goods while claiming you were struggling financially." Patricia grabbed the documents, her hands shaking harder now. "This is... You hired someone to spy on us? To build a case against your own daughter?" I documented the truth. There's a difference. She stood abruptly, papers scattering. "I'll fight this. We'll take you to court. We'll prove you were coerced. That you're not thinking clearly? Go ahead." I remained seated, perfectly calm. "You'll lose, but I encourage you to try. My lawyer is quite looking forward to it, actually." She stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Maybe she hadn't. Maybe the version of me she knew was the one who kept writing checks and swallowing his hurt. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice breaking. "Tom and I won't just accept this. We have rights. You have exactly what the law allows you, which, as it turns out, isn't much when the father you've been exploiting decides he's had enough. She grabbed her purse and ran for the door. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. You'll regret this. We won't go down without a fight. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the windows. I sat in the quiet afterward, looking at the scattered papers. No satisfaction, exactly, but no regret either, just the cold clarity that comes from finally acting instead of enduring. My phone buzzed with a text from Gerald. Everything okay? Just got a very angry call from Patricia. Everything's fine, I typed back. Let me know when she hires a lawyer. I assume that's next. Already happened. Thompson and Associates called an hour ago asking for copies of your medical records. They're building a competency challenge. I smiled. Of course they were. Predictable as sunrise. Send them everything, I replied, and get ready for what comes next. The war had officially begun. The next 2 weeks were silent, the kind of quiet that precedes thunder. I continued running my restaurants, reviewed quarterly financials, spent a peaceful Sunday afternoon on my boat, catching nothing but enjoying the water anyway. The second chance lived up to its name that day, giving me space to think. Margaret Collins called on a Tuesday morning. Mr. Morris, I thought you should know. Your son-in-law just retained Thompson and Associates. They're preparing a legal challenge, and I'm hearing through my sources that they're actively recruiting witnesses. Witnesses to what? To your alleged incompetence. People who'll claim they saw you confused, disoriented, making poor decisions. Let me guess. They're having trouble finding credible ones. A dry laugh. They're having trouble finding any real ones, so they're manufacturing them instead. 5 days later, a formal letter arrived via certified mail. Thompson and Associates, on behalf of Patricia Morris Johnston and Thomas Johnston, were petitioning Charleston County Probate Court to declare the November will modification invalid due to undue influence and diminished mental capacity. They'd attached 3 sworn statements. A neighbor, whose name I recognized as Tom's golf buddy, claimed he'd witnessed me forgetting where I'd parked my car last September. A former waitress from my restaurant said I'd been confused and mixing up orders in October. And an acquaintance from my business networking group reported concerning changes in behavior and decision-making at a December meeting. I handed everything to Gerald that same afternoon. He read through it with the careful attention of someone examining a complex recipe for floss. This is sloppy work, he said finally, almost embarrassingly so. The neighbor, that's Brian Holloway, correct? Tom's regular golf partner for the past 3 years. The same. And this waitress, he checked his notes. Sarah Martinez. Didn't she get terminated for theft? Caught stealing from the register. We have security footage. And the business acquaintance who received a $5,000 consulting fee from Tom 1 week before signing this statement? I'll let you prove that one, but yes, I'd bet money on it. Gerald almost smiled. They're desperate. This won't hold up in court, but we should go on offense anyway. Make sure everyone knows you're sharp as ever. That's when I remembered the Charleston Post and Courier had been trying to schedule an interview about the restaurant's anniversary. I called them that evening. The reporter, a woman named Amanda Chen, showed up 3 days later with a photographer. We talked for nearly 2 hours about building the business from scratch, about low-country cuisine traditions, about the challenges of maintaining quality across 3 locations, about my plans for the next decade. She was sharp, asking detailed questions about supply chains, labor management, financial planning for succession. I answered everything comprehensively, referencing specific numbers, dates, strategic decisions. The photographer caught me reviewing expense reports, consulting with Stephen about a new menu concept, discussing the upcoming oyster harvest season with my suppliers. The article ran a week later under the headline, Charleston's Culinary Icon, Sharp Mind, Sharper Business Sense at 67. Amanda had written nearly 3,000 words detailing my business acumen, my clear vision for the future, my sharp recall of 40 years of restaurant operations. I sent a copy to Thompson and Associates with a short note. Looking forward to court. The hearing was scheduled for early March. Charleston County Probate Court, Judge Ellen Anderson presiding. I arrived with Gerald at 8:30 for the 9 o'clock session, wearing my best suit and carrying a leather folder with every document we'd need. Patricia and Tom sat across the aisle with their lawyer, a man in his 50s with an expensive suit and tired eyes. He looked like someone who knew he was carrying a losing hand, but had to play it anyway. Judge Anderson, silver-haired, precise, with the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who'd heard every family drama imaginable, reviewed the petition and our response. Then she looked up at the assembled parties. Mr. Thompson, present your case. The three witnesses testified exactly as their statements suggested. Brian Holloway described seeing me confused about my car in a parking lot. Sarah Martinez claimed I'd been disoriented during dinner service. The business acquaintance, Michael Preston, spoke vaguely about concerning changes in my behavior. Gerald cross-examined each one methodically, a surgeon identifying every weak point. Mr. Holloway, how many times per month do you play golf with Mr. Johnston? I don't know. Maybe 3 or 4 times. And has he discussed Mr. Morris's will with you? We might have talked about it. Before or after you signed this statement? Holloway's face flushed. I'm trying to help a friend. For Sarah Martinez. Ms. Martinez, were you terminated from Morris Catch for cause? There was a misunderstanding. Yes or no, please? Yes. And do you harbor any resentment toward Mr. Morris? Her silence was answer enough. Michael Preston collapsed under questions about the $5,000 payment from Tom. It was for consulting services? On what topic? Investment advice? But you're not a licensed financial advisor, are you? No, but thank you. No further questions. Then Gerald presented our evidence. The medical evaluations, 3 independent doctors, all confirming sharp cognitive function. The newspaper article published days before. My restaurant's financial records showing sophisticated planning and management. Testimonials from employees, suppliers, business partners, all describing my clear leadership and sound decision-making. Judge Anderson took exactly 40 minutes to review everything and render her decision. Mr. Morris clearly possesses full mental capacity. The testimony presented against him is either demonstrably biased or contradicted by substantial evidence of his ongoing competence. This petition appears to be a transparent attempt to challenge estate decisions based on financial self-interest rather than legitimate concern for Mr. Morris's welfare. She looked directly at Patricia and Tom. The petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm issuing a warning that frivolous challenges to competent individuals' estate planning decisions may result in sanctions. This court takes a dim view of family members attempting to manipulate the legal system for financial gain. Patricia's face went white. Tom gripped the table edge so hard his knuckles matched. Their lawyer gathered his papers with the efficient movements of someone eager to leave. Outside the courthouse, Gerald shook my hand. That was decisive. They won't try this angle again. What will they try? Nothing smart, probably. Desperate people make predictable mistakes. I drove back to the restaurant, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite peace, but its close cousin. The relief that comes from being right, from preparation paying off, from standing firm instead of bending. Patricia and Tom had thrown their first punch. I'd blocked it cleanly, and I was ready for whatever came next. 10 days after the court hearing, Patricia and Tom made their final, desperate play. It was a Saturday evening, our busiest night of the week. The King Street restaurant was packed, every table filled, the bar 3 deep with customers waiting for seats. Stephen had outdone himself with a special menu featuring local oysters and she-crab soup, and the atmosphere hummed with conversation and laughter. I was in my second-floor office reviewing next week's seafood orders when I heard Tom's voice carry up the stairs. Loud, aggressive, meant to be heard. This restaurant belongs to us. My father-in-law has no right running it. He's old, sick, incompetent. The dining room went silent. I could picture it perfectly. Conversations stopping mid-sentence, forks pausing halfway to mouths, everyone turning to look at the man shouting in a place where people came to enjoy themselves. I gathered the folder I'd prepared weeks ago for exactly this moment, straightened my tie, and descended the stairs at an unhurried pace. Patricia and Tom stood in the center of the dining room, like actors on a stage they'd chosen themselves. Patricia looked frantic, her eyes wild. Tom had adopted an aggressive stance, chest out, chin up, playing to an audience he thought would sympathize. Patricia, I said calmly, reaching the bottom of the stairs. I see you're staging another performance. Should I sell tickets? Don't start with your sarcasm, Patricia's voice cracked. You robbed us. We're your family. This business should be ours. I opened the folder, keeping my voice level and clear, loud enough for everyone to hear without shouting. Let's talk about numbers, since you both seem so concerned with money. These 3 restaurants generate about $580,000 in net profit annually. Over the 5 years you've been married, Patricia, I've given you $847,000. That's nearly a year and a half of complete business profits. I pulled out the first document. My house on Battery Street is worth $2.8 million. You live in a house I bought you for $780,000. And after all that generosity, Patricia sent me a text message saying I should forget about any help from her in my old age because she has her own life. Patricia's face flushed. That was just, I was upset. I didn't mean. You also tried to involve me in a fraudulent investment scheme, I continued. That Hilton Head Resort project Tom pitched at Christmas? The FBI opened an investigation into it 6 months ago. It's a pyramid scheme that's already cost investors millions. Tom went pale. Actually pale. The kind of bloodless white that happens when someone realizes their world is collapsing. You can't prove. I can. I spread documents across the nearest table. These are the materials you sent me. These are Laura Hamilton's findings. She's my financial consultant who verified the fraud. And these are copies of what I sent to the FBI Charleston Division. The restaurant had become completely silent. Every single person was watching, listening. This wasn't the private confrontation Patricia and Tom had wanted. It was public exposure, and they were trapped in it. Then there's the court case you just lost, I said. You hired 3 people to testify I was mentally incompetent. One was Tom's golf buddy. One was a former employee I'd fired for theft. One received a $5,000 payment from Tom the week before signing his statement. The judge dismissed your petition and warned you about sanctions for frivolous lawsuits. I looked directly at the assembled diners. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. My daughter and her husband have been living off my financial support for years. When I changed my will after Patricia told me to forget about their help, they tried to have me declared incompetent. 3 days ago, Charleston County Probate Court rejected their challenge. Patricia swayed on her feet. Tom grabbed a chair to steady himself. But here's what you don't know, I said, and this was the moment I'd been waiting for, the culmination of everything I'd built. On January 15th, I transferred 85% ownership of these restaurants into the Morris Culinary Foundation Trust. Legally, it's no longer my personal property. I remain the managing trustee with full operational control for life. But upon my death, everything goes to fund scholarships for young culinary students from South Carolina. Patricia made a sound like she'd been hit. Tom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. You can't contest a trust the way you contest a will, I continued. The transfer is complete, legally sound, and irrevocable. These restaurants don't belong to me anymore to give to you. They belong to the foundation. Your inheritance from my business is exactly $0. That's impossible, Tom whispered. His hands were shaking. You couldn't have... The courts have already reviewed my mental capacity and found me perfectly competent. I have documentation from 3 physicians, financial records showing sophisticated planning, and a newspaper article from last month describing my sharp business acumen. You've already tried and failed to prove otherwise. I turned back to Patricia. Her face had crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. But these weren't the manipulative tears I'd seen before. These were the tears of someone watching their assumptions about the world shatter in real time. The house will also go to the foundation, I said. Your inheritance from my personal estate will be $50,000. Enough that you can't claim complete disinheritance. Not enough to be worth fighting over. I closed the folder. Now, unless you'd like to continue making a scene in front of all these nice people who came here for a pleasant dinner, I suggest you leave. Tom grabbed Patricia's arm and pulled her toward the door. At the threshold, he turned back, trying to salvage some dignity. This isn't over. Yes, I interrupted, and it is. They left. The door closed behind them. For a moment, the restaurant remained silent. Then someone started clapping. Others joined. Within seconds, the entire dining room was applauding, not for me, but for justice, for standing up, for not letting anyone walk all over you just because they're family. I raised my hands, quieting them. Thank you, but please, enjoy your meals. Stevens put together something special tonight, and I don't want it getting cold. The normal restaurant sounds resumed. Conversation, laughter, the clink of silverware on plates. But something had shifted. I'd drawn a line in the sand publicly, and everyone had seen exactly where that line was. Back in my office, I sat down and realized my hands were trembling. Not from fear or anger, from the sheer release of months of pressure. I'd done it. I'd protected everything I'd built, and I'd done it without compromising my values or breaking any laws. My phone buzzed. Gerald Richardson. Just heard what happened from 3 different people who were at dinner. Well played. I smiled and texted back. Phase 1 complete. Now we see what they do next. 3 days later, the FBI contacted Tom. I learned about it from Margaret Collins, who'd maintained her watching brief on their activities. Federal agents interviewed him for 2 hours about his connection to the Hilton Head project. They're building the case against the scheme's organizers and looking at everyone who recruited investors. Is Tom in serious trouble? Depends on what they find. If he just tried to rope you in, probably not. But if he actively recruited others after the investigation started, she paused meaningfully, that's a different story. A week after the restaurant confrontation, Patricia showed up at my house alone. No Tom, no anger, just exhaustion written across every line of her face. She sat in my living room, staring at her hands for a long moment before speaking. I ruined everything, didn't I? I didn't answer, didn't feel like I needed to. Tom keeps saying this is all your fault, that you're punishing us out of spite, destroying our lives for no reason. She looked up at me, and her eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. But that's not true, is it? I did this. I treated you like an ATM. I forgot you were a person with feelings, not just a resource I could access whenever I needed money. The words hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to comfort her, to say it would all work out. But the larger part, the part that had spent 5 years being used and dismissed, stayed silent. I'm not asking you to forgive me, she continued. I'm not asking you to change the will or the trust or any of it. I just wanted you to know that I understand. I was a terrible daughter, and I'm sorry. Her voice broke on that last word. These weren't manipulative tears designed to get what she wanted. This was genuine regret, genuine recognition of what she'd done. Patricia, I said carefully, I'm glad you're beginning to understand, but understanding comes too late. I spent 5 years trying to buy your love with money. That was my mistake too, thinking generosity would create genuine connection. Dad, the foundation stays. The business will fund scholarships for young people who actually dream about cooking, not just about easy money. My house goes to the foundation too. In my will, you get $50,000. More than nothing, enough that you can't successfully challenge it. That's my final accounting. She nodded slowly, accepting it. Tom's saying we should find another lawyer. Try another angle. But I told him no. I told him we lost because we deserved to lose. That surprised me. How'd he take that? Not well. We've been fighting constantly since the restaurant thing. He's angry that you sent the FBI information about Hilton Head. Says you're trying to destroy him. I'm not trying to destroy anyone. I sent the FBI evidence of a fraudulent scheme because it was the right thing to do. What happens after that is entirely up to Tom and his choices. 2 weeks later, Margaret called with news. Tom's in deeper trouble than he thought. The FBI found evidence he recruited 5 more people into the Hilton Head scheme after they'd publicly announced their investigation. That's obstruction, potentially conspiracy to commit fraud. He's looking at federal charges. And Patricia? She filed for divorce yesterday. Smart move on her part. Establishes distance before the criminal charges hit. I felt no triumph. Just a sad satisfaction that justice was working exactly as it should. In early May, the IRS contacted me. During their review of Tom's finances related to the FBI investigation, they discovered he'd never reported the gifts I'd given him and Patricia. Under federal law, any gift over $15,000 per year needs to be declared. Tom had failed to report nearly $200,000 in undeclared gift income over 3 years. They asked for documentation. I provided every bank transfer, every check, every text message where Patricia had asked for money and promised to repay it. The paper trail was immaculate because I'd kept every record. The IRS opened a formal investigation into both Patricia and Tom for unpaid gift taxes. Estimated liability, $89,000 plus penalties and interest. Patricia called me the day she received the notice. Did you give them all that information? They asked for documentation of gifts I'd given. I provided it. That's all. You're not trying to help us, are you? No, I said honestly. I'm not trying to hurt you either. I'm simply answering questions truthfully. What happens after that is the natural consequence of your choices. She was quiet for a long moment. That's fair, I guess. Tom's furious, but that's fair. By midsummer, the full weight of their situation had become clear. Tom faced federal fraud charges that could mean 18 months in prison. The IRS wanted nearly $90,000 they didn't have. Patricia had lost her house. It had to be sold to cover part of Tom's debts and the tax liability. She'd moved into a small apartment and taken a full-time job at a travel agency. She had also started seeing a therapist. She mentioned it when we had coffee one afternoon in late September, the first time we'd met socially in almost a year. I'm trying to understand how I became this person, she said, how I forgot that you were my father, not just a wallet. My therapist thinks I learned to equate love with money growing up, and then Tom reinforced that pattern. That's probably fair, I agreed, and I enabled it. Every time you asked and I said yes without question, I was teaching you that money was how I showed love. We both made mistakes. Yes, but only one of us is working to change. She smiled sadly. I'm not asking to go back to how things were. I know that's impossible. But maybe, eventually, we could have some kind of relationship, something honest without expectations. I thought about it. Maybe, in time, but it would have to be genuine. No manipulation, no hidden agendas. I understand. We finished our coffee and went our separate ways. Not enemies anymore, but not family either. Something in between. Something undefined and tentative. And that, I realized, was exactly what we both needed. The transformation was complete. I'd gone from victim to guardian of my own life, from being exploited to being respected, from trying to buy love to accepting that real love can't be purchased. The cost had been high, but the alternative, continuing to be used, to be dismissed, to be treated as nothing more than a source of funds, would have cost me something far more valuable. It would have cost me myself. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that makes Charleston shimmer. The city slowed down, tourists flooding in while locals sought shade and sweet tea. But I stayed busy, busier than I'd been in years. The Morris Culinary Foundation was no longer just paperwork and legal structures. It was real, taking shape day by day. Laura Hamilton had assembled a selection committee, local chefs, culinary school administrators, restaurant owners who understood what genuine passion for cooking looked like. We'd announced the scholarship program in April, and by May, applications were flooding in. 240 applications for 15 spots. Each one a story, a dream, a young person who saw cooking not as a job, but as a calling. I read every single application myself, sat in my office late into the evening reviewing essays about grandmother's kitchens and family recipes, passed down through generations, about young people who'd worked dish pit jobs to pay for community college culinary classes, about dreams of opening restaurants, preserving traditional low-country cooking, feeding communities. These were my people, the ones who understood that food isn't just sustenance, it's connection, memory, love expressed through careful preparation and presentation. In early June, we held the official foundation launch at the Charleston Gaillard Center. 300 people packed the auditorium, local chefs whose restaurants competed with mine, culinary students in their whites, food writers, city officials. Stephen had coordinated with 5 other restaurants to provide the reception food, a spread showcasing the best of Charleston cuisine. I stood at the podium, looking out at faces I'd known for decades and faces I'd never seen before. 40 years ago, I started with a single restaurant and a dream that food could build community. Today I'm honored to announce that the Morris Culinary Foundation will award 15 full scholarships annually, $25,000 each, to South Carolina students pursuing careers in the culinary arts. The applause was genuine, enthusiastic. But I wasn't done. These scholarships aren't charity. They're investment in the future of our food culture. The recipients we've chosen aren't just skilled. They're passionate. They understand that cooking is service, is art, is the daily practice of caring for others through what we put on their plates. I listed the 15 names, watched young faces light up as they heard their own names called. A 19-year-old from Mount Pleasant who wanted to open a restaurant serving healthy meals to senior citizens. A 22-year-old Charleston native focused on preserving traditional gulagichi recipes. A 20-year-old woman from Beaufort specializing in pastry arts. After the ceremony, they gathered around me, eager, grateful, slightly overwhelmed. I shook each hand, looked each one in the eye. Don't thank me. Just do the work. Learn everything you can. Then use that knowledge to feed people who need it. Standing in that crowd, I caught movement near the back wall. Patricia, half hidden behind a column, watching. Our eyes met across the room. She didn't approach, didn't wave, just stood there observing what I'd built, what her inheritance had become instead. After the crowd dispersed, she came forward. "It's beautiful, Dad, what you've created here. I wish I'd understood sooner what really mattered to you." "So do I said simply. We stood in awkward silence for a moment, then she left. Not angry anymore, just sad, accepting the reality of what she'd lost through her own choices. The consequences for Patricia and Tom continued unfolding through summer like a slow-motion collapse. Patricia's divorce finalized in late July. The house on Seabrook Island, the one I'd helped buy, sold at a loss to cover Tom's debts and the IRS settlement. She moved into a modest apartment, took a full-time position at a travel agency. Tom's sentencing came in mid-August. 18 months in federal prison for his role in the Hilton Head scheme, plus restitution and probation. Patricia didn't attend the hearing. She'd drawn her line, separated herself from his choices. Early September brought the moment I'd been waiting for, meeting all 15 scholarship recipients together for the first time. We gathered at the King Street restaurant after hours, the dining room transformed into a classroom. I'd asked Stephen to demonstrate some fundamental techniques, but mostly I wanted to hear their stories, understand their dreams. They were hungry, not for food, but for knowledge, for opportunity, for someone to believe in their potential. Listening to them talk about flavor profiles and kitchen efficiency and sustainable sourcing, I remembered why I'd fallen in love with cooking in the first place. It wasn't about the money or the recognition. It was about transformation, taking raw ingredients and creating something that brought people joy. My father taught me that cooking is the most honest work there is, I told them. You can't fake passion for food. Diners know within 3 bites whether a chef cares about what they're serving. These scholarships are my way of saying, I believe you care. Don't prove me wrong. One of them, Marcus, the young man focused on low-country traditions, raised his hand. "Mr. Morris, why did you create this foundation? You could have just passed your restaurants to family." I considered the question carefully. Because family is who shows up, who does the work, who honors what you've built. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, and loyalty isn't limited to blood. You 15 and the hundreds who'll come after you. You're my legacy now. Make it count. Later that month, Patricia came to the restaurant again, asked if we could talk. We sat in the same corner where we'd had coffee weeks before. "I found a therapist," she said. "Good one specializes in family dynamics and financial codependency. We're working through a lot, how I learned to equate love with money, how Tom manipulated that, how I manipulated you without even realizing that's what I was doing." "That's good," I said. "Genuine self-awareness is rare. I'm not asking us to go back to how things were. I know that's impossible. The relationship we had died with that Thanksgiving text. But maybe, eventually, we could build something new? Something honest?" I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, saw someone genuinely trying to change, not performing for my benefit, but working on herself. "Maybe," I allowed, "in time, when we're both ready. But it has to be real, Patricia. No expectations, no hidden agendas. Just two people trying to figure out how to be in each other's lives. I can do that, she said. Or at least, I'm willing to try. We left it there, tentative, undefined, but no longer hostile. Not family yet, but not enemies either. Something in between, something that might eventually grow into something genuine. As September turned toward October and the anniversary of that Thanksgiving message approached, I found myself taking stock. The restaurants were thriving. The foundation was funding 15 dreams. Patricia was working on herself. Tom was facing the consequences of his actions. And me? I'd transformed from someone being used into someone living deliberately. From trying to buy love to accepting that real love can't be purchased. The cost had been high, but the alternative, remaining a victim, continuing to enable, losing myself in the process, would have been higher. Almost a year had passed since that Thanksgiving text message that changed everything. I sat in my office above the King Street restaurant on a cool October afternoon, looking out at Charleston Harbor. The view never got old, water reflecting autumn light, boats moving slowly through the channel. On my desk lay the second semester scholarship checks for all 15 recipients. $750,000 in total disbursements over the year. Money that once would have gone to Patricia, now funding young people who'd actually use it to build something meaningful. 3 floors below, lunch service was winding down. Stephen had developed a new fall menu featuring local oysters and butternut squash, and the food critics were already writing glowing reviews. The business was as strong as it had ever been, maybe stronger because I was more present, more engaged now that I wasn't constantly distracted by family drama. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Dad, I know tomorrow is Mom's anniversary. If you don't mind, I'd like to join you at the cemetery." 10 a.m.? I stared at the message for a long moment. Tomorrow would mark the date my wife had died years ago, a private grief I'd carried alone for so long. The fact that Patricia remembered, that she wanted to be there, meant something. 10 o'clock, I typed back. "I'll meet you there." The next morning was crisp and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day Charleston does best. I arrived at Magnolia Cemetery a few minutes early, stood looking at the stone marker that bore my wife's name. 23 years she'd been gone. If she could see how our daughter had turned out, how I'd nearly lost myself trying to compensate for her absence. Patricia arrived exactly on time, carrying flowers. We stood together for the first time in 11 months, without tension crackling between us. She placed the flowers carefully, then whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry I ruined what you and Dad built together. I'm working on being better, on being someone you'd be proud of." I said nothing, letting her have that moment. Afterward, walking to our cars, she asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you ever regret what you did? The foundation, the will, all of it?" I stopped, considered my answer carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that you forced me to choose between my dignity and a relationship with my daughter. But do I regret the choice itself? No." I looked at her directly. "Justice always has a price, Patricia. The price of my justice was losing the daughter I thought I had. But if I hadn't acted, I would have lost something more important, myself, and that I couldn't allow." She nodded slowly. "That's fair. More than fair, actually. You said you're seeing a therapist," I continued. "If that's genuine, if you really are changing, maybe in a few years we can find a way to have some kind of relationship. Not like before. That person you were and that person I was don't exist anymore. But something new, something honest." "I'd like that," she said quietly. "I promise I'll do the work." We parted there, heading to our separate lives. Not reconciled, but not at war. It was enough for now. Maybe enough forever. I drove back to the restaurant. The afternoon held meetings with the next round of scholarship applicants. 25 this year, the program growing as word spread. Inside, the walls displayed photos from the foundation launch, young faces full of hope and determination. Stephen met me in the kitchen. "Boss, the fish delivery's here. Beautiful catch today. And that food writer from Bon Appetit wants to do a feature on the foundation." "Tell her yes," I said. "The more people who know about it, the more applications we get. Better pool to choose from." He grinned. "You're building something special here." We're building it, I corrected. None of this works without people who care. Later, standing in the dining room as dinner service began, I watched the careful choreography of service. Servers moving smoothly between tables, kitchens sending out perfectly plated dishes, guests leaning back in satisfied pleasure after good meals. This was what I'd built. Not just restaurants, but places where people gathered, connected, celebrated life's moments over food that someone had prepared with care. On the wall near the entrance hung a brass plaque. Morris Culinary Foundation, building tomorrow's chefs. That plaque represented everything I'd fought for. Not revenge exactly, though there was satisfaction in knowing Patricia and Tom had faced consequences for their actions. Not even justice in its purest form. No, what I'd won was something simpler and more profound. The right to decide my own legacy. To ensure that 40 years of work wouldn't be squandered on people who'd never valued it. To transform betrayal into something generative and good. Patricia had written that text telling me to forget about their help, to hire a caregiver, that they had their own lives. She'd meant it as dismissal, as permission to use me without guilt. Instead, it had freed me to see clearly, to act decisively, to build something that would outlive me in ways that actually mattered. Tom was in prison. Patricia had lost her house, her marriage, her comfortable life. The IRS had extracted its pound of flesh, and I had 15 bright young culinary students whose lives I'd changed, whose careers I'd launched, whose dreams I'd made possible. In the balance of justice, I'd gotten exactly what I'd sought. The cost? A daughter I'd once known. The comfortable illusion that family loyalty was automatic and unconditional. The naive belief that generosity alone could create genuine love. The gain? Self-respect. Purpose. A legacy that would ripple forward through hundreds of young chefs over the years to come. The satisfaction of knowing I'd stood up for myself when it mattered most. As the evening crowd filled the restaurant, as the kitchen hummed with focused energy, as diners laughed and talked over meals that showcased everything I'd built, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of alignment between my values and my actions. I'd spent 5 years being used, nearly a year fighting back, and now, finally, I was simply living, running my restaurants, building my foundation, creating something meaningful that would survive me. That Thanksgiving text message had cost Patricia $5 million, but it had given me something worth more than any inheritance, the unshakable knowledge that I'd chosen myself when I needed to most. Justice can be painful, but injustice, continuing to accept mistreatment, enabling exploitation, losing yourself piece by piece, is far more painful in the end. I'd made my choice. Patricia would live with hers. And in the careful balance of consequences and redemption, we'd both learned what we needed to learn. The lesson was expensive, but some lessons are worth any price. If you like this story, please like this video and subscribe to the Cold Revenge channel, as the Sweet Revenge channel will soon cease to exist. Also, share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the field on the left. Thank you for watching.